On Murdoch Avenue in the Wakefield section of the Bronx, the sound that woke residents just before midnight wasn't unusual because it was loud. It was unusual because it didn't belong there. Neighbors described that block as quiet, the kind of street where the only noise most nights is a car passing with its windows down. That night, it was gunfire. And by the time it stopped, a 39-year-old woman named Julia Anderson was lying on the pavement next to her Jeep, just weeks away from her 40th birthday.
The NYPD working to find who pulled the trigger in a fatal shooting. It happened around midnight last night as a Mount Vernon woman left her job in the Wakefield section of the Bronx. Police say Julia Anderson was shot multiple times at close range. Tony Aiello spoke with family and friends of the victim.
Julia had just finished an overnight shift at a group home in Wakefield, where she spent her days caring for adults with developmental disabilities. She'd been doing that work for over 10 years. Speaking with her coworkers, they describe her as the kind of person who showed up quietly and consistently, someone the residents and staff around her had come to depend on. That night was supposed to be like every other night. She had just finished her shift, walked outside, and she was headed towards her car, parked just across the street from the building where she worked. She was at the point of driving back home, but she never got the chance to drive away. Witnesses and surveillance footage from a nearby resident captured the moment gunfire rang out, and a shooter on a scooter fled the scene within seconds. Julia was rushed to a nearby hospital, but doctors couldn't save her. She was pronounced dead a short time later, 1 month shy of turning 40. For 2 days, there was no arrest, just a grieving family. The man arrested wasn't a stranger. He was her uncle, a 58-year-old man who had been living in the very same home as her, on Bell Avenue in Mount Vernon. Also living in that home, according to reporting on the case, was Julia's mother.
Is there any reason why somebody would have been targeting her?
Not quite sure.
What's going through your head right now?
Well, I just took 2 Tylenol because I didn't feel too well. I just feel I don't know how to describe it.
3 generations, 1 roof, and a fault line running underneath it that nobody outside that house seemed to know was there. So what was that fault line? This is where the story moves from tragedy into something more complicated, because according to public records referenced in coverage of the case, the Bell Avenue property had originally belonged to Julia's grandmother. The understanding within the family, from my findings, was that the home would eventually pass down to Julia. Investigators and reporters covering the case have pointed to a dispute over that inheritance, over who actually had the right to that house, as the likely motive behind the shooting. It's worth being clear here that police have not released an official, confirmed motive, and this detail comes from sources and public records rather than a formal statement, but it lines up with what family members have said publicly since the arrest. If that's what actually happened here, it's a brutal illustration of something that plays out in families far more often than most people realize. Property that's been in a family for generations doesn't always come with a clear plan for who inherits it. Some people online have argued that if there had been a clear will, this tragedy might never have happened. It's a reasonable question to ask, but I think an even more important one is this. At what point did her uncle become capable of harming the very people he loved? Were there warning signs the family didn't recognize or didn't know how to respond to? When there's no will, or when expectations are only discussed verbally and never put in writing, that uncertainty can linger for years. Sometimes it never becomes anything more than quiet resentment. But while disputes over inheritance can create tension, they don't, by themselves, explain an act of extreme violence. Understanding what may have contributed to such a tragedy requires looking beyond the property dispute and considering the broader circumstances, while recognizing that the full picture may never be known. Think about what that actually means for a family living under one roof. A grandmother buys a home, raises her children in it, and eventually that home becomes the anchor for the next generation too. Maybe nothing is ever formally decided. Maybe it's just assumed. The kind of thing family members talk about at holidays without ever putting a signature on paper. It is believed that Julia had been told that the house would eventually be hers. Her uncle, sharing that same address, may have seen it differently. Somewhere between those two understandings, whatever civility existed between them broke down completely. And unlike most inheritance disputes, which end in family group chats gone cold or lawyers trading letters, this one ended with a woman shot outside her workplace. On Wednesday evening, less than 48 hours after Julia was killed, they arrested her uncle and walked him out of the 47th precinct in handcuffs. He was charged with murder, manslaughter, and 10 counts of criminal possession of a weapon. That same morning, investigators were seen at the Bell Avenue home, carrying out evidence and combing through the property for anything that could establish a motive and tie their suspect to the shooting. The scooter is a detail worth pausing on. Surveillance footage from a resident on the block captured the shooter approaching on it and fleeing the same way just seconds after the gunfire stopped, weaving off into a neighborhood that, by every neighbor's account, almost never sees this kind of violence. It's a small detail, but it speaks to intent. Someone didn't wander onto that block by accident. Someone came prepared with a way in and a way out already planned. For Julia's family, the arrest didn't soften anything. Her sister was too distraught to speak on camera in the days after. Her mother described the moment she learned her daughter was gone, saying it felt like her heart was going to come out of her chest.
Usually when she comes home, like around 12 o'clock, she kind of makes some kind of noise, so I know she's back. But I didn't hear her, so I was wondering what happened.
As of now, her uncle is awaiting his day in court. He has not entered a plea, and like anyone charged with a crime, he's presumed innocent until proven otherwise. The investigation is still active, and it's likely more details about what exactly happened inside that Bell Avenue home will come out as this case moves forward. What's already clear is this: a woman who spent her career caring for others was killed steps from the place she did that work, allegedly by someone who was supposed to be family. A house passed down through generations may have become the very thing that cost her life. And a community in the Bronx is left asking how something that starts as a disagreement over property ends with gunfire on a quiet street at midnight. It's much harder to sit with the idea that the same thing could come from inside your own family, inside your own home, over something as ordinary as a piece of property. Julia Anderson spent a decade making sure other people were safe and cared for. In the end, the danger she couldn't see coming was the one closest to her. If this case affected you, let us know in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss how this one plays out in court.